Close your eyes and let your mind wander far north to a land of fjords and frozen seas, of endless forests and winds that cut like blades. Here, centuries ago, lived the Vikings. Too many, they are remembered as raiders, fierce warriors in longships, their names whispered in fear along the coasts of Europe. But behind the stories of blood and fire lay a world far more complex, a world of farmers, traders, explorers, poets, and dreamers. The Viking Age began around the late 8th century, when their ships first appeared on distant shores, and it lasted for nearly 3 centuries. In that time, they sailed not only west toward Britain, Ireland, and France, but south toward Spain, east along the rivers of Russia, and even across the Atlantic, reaching Iceland, Greenland, and the distant coast of North America. Few peoples of history traveled so far, so boldly, and yet, despite their fame as warriors, most Vikings were not raiders. They were farmers, fishermen, craftsmen, mothers, children. Their days were spent sowing barley, weaving cloth, tending animals, and keeping fires alive against the long winters. Their lives were hard, filled with both beauty and struggle, shaped always by the cold, the sea, and the demands of survival. Tonight, we will step gently into their world. We will walk the muddy fields of their farms, sail upon their dragon-headed ships, sit beside their fires as they tell stories of gods and heroes. We will learn of their families, their laws, their beliefs, and the legacy they left behind. Breathe deeply now. Feel the chill of the northern air, the scent of salt carried from the sea, the distant cry of gulls. The Viking world awaits, steady and quiet, its echoes still whispering through time. Before the longships and the raids, before the songs of battle and discovery, there was the soil. To be a Viking farmer was to live at the mercy of a harsh and unforgiving land. Imagine dawn breaking over a small farmstead. The sky is pale, the air crisp, and frost lingers on the grass, even in spring. A low wooden house sits in the center, its walls made of timber and sod, its roof heavy with turf to keep out the cold. Smoke drifts from a hole in the roof, carrying with it the smell of last night's fire. Inside, the family stirs. They rise from beds of straw, pulling on woolen tunics and cloaks. Breakfast is simple bread, made from barley or rye, perhaps a little porridge, sometimes cheese if the animals have been generous. There is no abundance here, only enough to continue the day's work. The fields are small, carved from land that is often rocky and thin. To plow them, the farmer harnesses oxen, urging them forward slowly, the wooden plow cutting shallow furrows. The soil is stubborn, heavy with stones. Crops of barley, rye, and oats grow, but the harvest is never certain. A cold summer, a flood, or a swarm of pests could mean hunger when winter comes. Animals are vital. Sheep provide wool for clothing, cows give milk, pigs and goats supply meat when slaughtered, but these two require constant care. Imagine trudging into the pasture in cold rain, your boots sinking into the mud, carrying feed to animals whose survival will determine your own. Life is ruled by the seasons. In summer, the sun lingers long in the sky, allowing work from dawn to dusk. In winter, darkness falls early, snow piles against the house, and families huddle inside, weaving, carving, telling stories to pass the endless nights. It is a time of survival, of rationing food, of praying that the stores last until spring. Taxes and duties press down as well. Local chieftains demand a share of crops or animals, and the sea calls many men away on voyages, leaving women, children, and the elderly to manage farms alone. Survival is a constant balance of effort and endurance, and yet, in this struggle, there is also beauty. Picture the fields in summer, golden with barley swaying in the breeze. Streams glitter in the sunlight, wildflowers scatter color across the hills. At night, the northern sky glows with the shifting lights of the aurora, a reminder that even in hardship, the land carries wonder. Still, for most Vikings, life was not adventure upon foreign shores. It was this muddy boots, aching backs, calloused hands, and the endless work of coaxing life from soil that resisted at every turn. The sagas sing of warriors and kings, but behind every tale stood the farmer, quiet, enduring, the foundation upon which Viking society was built. Among all the names whispered in the sagas of the North, few shine as brightly or as strangely as Ragnar Lothbrok. Some say he was a real man, a Viking chieftain who sailed rivers and seas. Others believe he was more legend than flesh, his story woven from many lives into one. But whether real or imagined, Ragnar became the symbol of Viking daring, ambition, and fate. Imagine him first as a young man, the son of a minor noble, restless and bold. He longed for more than farming and fishing. He dreamed of ships, of distant shores, of fame that would outlive his body. In the sagas, he is said to have won his first wife, Lagertha, by slaying a bear and a hound, with nothing but a spear and his bare hands. A story already shaped more like legend than life. Ragnar's journeys carried him across the seas. He sailed to France, raiding the wealthy cities along the Seine. His longships glided silently along the river, their carved dragon heads striking fear before the warriors even set foot on land. Paris itself was said to tremble at his approach, its gates closed, its citizens hiding behind thick walls. But Ragnar was not only a raider, he was a seeker of fame, a man who measured his worth in stories told about him. In one tale, he wore trousers made of rough wool, coated in tar and sand to protect him from the bites of serpents. From this, he gained his strange name Lothbrok, shaggy breeches. Even his clothing became legend. His family grew into a dynasty of its own. Sons like Ivar the Boneless, Bjorn Ironside, and Sigurd Snake and Eye would become names feared across Europe. Each carried Ragnar's ambition outward, leading armies, founding kingdoms, carving their own sagas into history. But it was Ragnar who stood at the beginning, the father of a storm that swept across the continent. And like all sagas, his story carries tragedy. In one version, he sailed west with only a small force, captured by the king of Northumbria, cast into a pit of serpents. He met his end surrounded by coils and fangs. As he died, he is said to have laughed, his voice carrying defiance even in death. His words, remembered in the sagas, were proud. How the little pigs would grunt if they knew how the old boar suffers. With this, he promised that his sons would avenge him, and indeed, they did, leading the great heathen army into England, carving Ragnar's vengeance in blood and fire. Whether all this happened as told, no one can say. The records of monks and the songs of skalds weave truth and myth into a fabric too tangled to separate. Perhaps Ragnar was real, a man whose deeds were magnified by story. Perhaps he was only the shadow of many men, their lives blended into one figure of legend. But as you listen now, the question matters little. Ragnar's story was never only about him. It was about the Viking spirit, the hunger for adventure, the courage to face death, the pride in legacy. His life, whether lived or imagined, became a mirror in which generations saw themselves. Now picture a fire in a Viking hall, its flames flickering against carved beams. A skald, the poet of the people, stands before the crowd, his voice deep and steady as he sings of Ragnar's battles, his loves, his death. Warriors listen with bright eyes, children sit hushed, women smile faintly as they weave. Outside, the wind howls across the dark sea, but inside, the story glows, carrying warmth and meaning. Ragnar Lothbrok may be gone, but his name still lingers, like smoke curling into the rafters. If the Vikings had one true secret to their power, it was not only their courage or their axes, was their ships, sleek, strong, and swift. These long vessels carried them farther than most could dream, across oceans, up rivers, into the very heart of foreign lands. Without ships, there would have been no Viking Age. Imagine standing on a beach in Scandinavia 1,000 years ago. The morning mist clings low over the water, the sea cold and dark, waves breaking gently against the shore. There, pulled onto the sand, rests a longship. Its prow rises in a graceful curve, carved into the shape of a dragon's head. Teeth bared, eyes wide, as though ready to strike. The hull is narrow but long, built of overlapping planks of oak, each fitted with such precision that the vessel bends with the sea rather than against it. The ship is both beauty and utility. Shields hang along its sides, polished wood painted in bright colors, red, black, yellow. A single mast stands tall, its square sail, woven of wool, dyed in stripes or checks. In calm winds, oarsmen sit shoulder to shoulder, their paddles dipping in perfect rhythm, each stroke pulling the ship forward with quiet strength. With a good wind, the sail billows, and the ship cuts through the waves with the speed of a hunting falcon. These ships carried not only warriors, but also traders, explorers, and settlers. A longship might hold 50 men, their gear packed beneath benches, their lives entrusted to the wood and sail. Smaller nares, broader and deeper, carried cargo barrels of fish, sacks of grain, furs, amber, and weapons bound for distant markets. The Vikings' mastery lay not only in building ships, but in navigating them. With no compasses, no maps as we know them, they read the world itself. By day, they watched the sun's path across the sky. By night, they studied the stars, the North Star guiding them like a constant flame. They read the waves and the color of water, the flight of birds, the drift of clouds. Some say they used sunstones, crystals that revealed the sun's hidden light even on cloudy days. Imagine the silence of a long voyage. The sea stretches endlessly, the horizon unbroken. The creak of wood, the flap of sail, the dip of oars are the only sounds. Salt spray stings your face. The wind cuts cold. The gulls cry overhead. Yet there is also peace, the steady rhythm of the sea, the knowledge that these ships can carry you to lands unseen. With them, the Vikings reached England, Ireland, and France. They sailed down the rivers of Russia, founding trade routes that linked them to Byzantium and beyond. They ventured westward to Iceland, Greenland, and even Vinland, what we now call North America. No other people of their age traveled so far, their ships the bridges between worlds. Now picture the longship at dusk. The sun sinks low, painting the water in red. The ship glides quietly, its dragon prow cutting through the glow. The men rest their oars, their faces calm, the wind carrying them onward. In that moment, you feel it, the stillness of the sea, the strength of the ship, the vastness of the unknown waiting beyond the horizon. The Vikings' ships were more than vessels. They were companions, weapons, lifelines, and symbols of freedom. To see one was to know that adventure and perhaps danger was near. To sail upon one was to step into the endless embrace of the sea, carried forward by wood, wind, and will. Life in Viking society was shaped by the sea and the seasons, but it was also shaped by status, though their communities were small compared to great empires. The Vikings had a clear hierarchy, each person bound to a place in the order of things. At the very top stood the jarls, the nobles. Imagine a jarl seated in a longhouse built of timber and turf, its roof high, its beams carved with twisting designs of serpents and dragons. The fire glows in the central hearth, smoke drifting up through a hole in the roof. Around him, warriors sit on benches, drinking from horns, their voices rising in song. The jarl wears fine wool dyed in rich colors, perhaps trimmed with fur, a silver arm ring glinting in the firelight. His wealth comes from land, from ships, from raids and trade. Yet his power is not absolute. He must still earn the loyalty of his followers with generosity, feasts, and victories. Beneath the jarls were the carls, the free farmers and craftsmen. They formed the backbone of Viking society. Most were farmers, tending barley, rye, cattle, sheep, and pigs. Others were skilled in trades, blacksmiths shaping iron into blades and nails, carpenters building ships and homes, weavers creating cloth from wool. Carls owned their land, their tools, their animals. They could bear arms, join raids, speak at the Viking assembly, where laws were made. Their lives were hard, but they had freedom, a sense of dignity that came with being their own masters. And at the bottom were the thralls, the slaves. Their lives were marked by labor and obedience. Some were captives taken in raidsmen, women and children dragged from distant shores. Others were debtors or criminals bound into servitude. Thralls worked the hardest tasks, clearing land, herding animals, tending fires, grinding grain, hauling water. They slept in small, cold spaces, their lives tied not to themselves, but to the will of their masters. For a thrall, freedom was rare, but not impossible. Some were granted release after years of service. Others bought their freedom with silver earned through small tasks. A freed thrall could become a carl, though the shadow of servitude often lingered for generations. Between these classes, life intertwined. A jarl depended on his carls to farm his lands, to join him on raids, to fill his hall with food and stories. Carls depended on thralls for labor, freeing their own hands for plowing, fishing, or sailing. Thralls, though lowest, were part of the cycle of survival, their labor woven invisibly into the rhythm of daily life. And yet, compared to some societies, the Vikings had a certain fluidity. A brave carl who distinguished himself in battle could earn wealth and respect, rising close to the status of a jarl. A jarl who lost his fortune or failed to lead could fall into obscurity. Even a freed thrall could one day own land, though the climb was long and uncertain. Now picture a Viking settlement at dusk. In the largest hall, a jarl feasts with his men, the sound of laughter and music spilling into the night. In smaller homes, carls share meals of bread, fish, and ale with their families, their children drifting to sleep on straw beds. In the shadows, thralls finish their labors, carrying water, feeding animals, their bodies weary, their voices quiet. Different in rank, in power, in freedom, but all bound to the same land, the same sea, the same cycle of survival. This was Viking society, not equal, not free for all, but ordered in a way that gave structure to their world. A ladder of lives, each step shaping the one above and below, together forming the world of the North. When the world remembers the Vikings, it is often for the sudden strike of their longships upon foreign shores. In the early mornings, when the mist still clung to the water, villages along the coasts of England, Ireland, and France would look to the horizon and see the dragon-proud ships approaching. For those who lived there, the sight brought fear. For the Vikings, it brought opportunity. But raids were not only violence, they were a way of life born from necessity. The rocky soil of Scandinavia offered little surplus, and the growing populations hungered for land, wealth, and adventure. To take to the sea was to seek what the land could not give. Imagine a Viking crew preparing for a raid. The longship rests in shallow waters, its sail furled. Men wear simple tunics, cloaks pinned with brooches, their weapons close at hand axes sharpened, spears balanced, shields polished and painted. They carry not only arms, but also ropes, tools, and provisions. The sea breeze is cold, the sky pale, and excitement hums among them like the taut string of a bow. The raids struck swiftly. Monasteries along the coasts were often targets wealthy, yet lightly defended. Bells would ring, monks would scatter, and treasures of silver, gold, and manuscripts would be carried back to the ships. Towns and villages to felt the weight of sudden attack. But always, the longships vanished as quickly as they came, slipping back to sea before armies could gather. Yet, not every voyage was a raid. Many were journeys of settlement and trade. Picture a longship arriving at the shores of Ireland. Its crew not only warriors, but farmers and families seeking new land to cultivate. In Normandy, in what is now France, Vikings settled, blending with the people, giving rise to a new land of their own, the Normans. In England, they founded towns that still stand today, their names echoing in the syllables of modern maps. Eastward, the rivers of Russia carried Viking ships deep into the continent. Known as the Rus, they founded trade routes to Constantinople, where the riches of Byzantium dazzled their eye silks, spices, jewels, and gold. Some even entered the service of the Byzantine emperor as Varangian guards, standing tall and fierce in the palaces of Constantinople, their axes gleaming beneath mosaics of gold and glass. And westward, their courage reached further still. Across the open ocean, Vikings sailed to Iceland, to Greenland, and even to Vinland, believed to be the coast of North America. Imagine the endless sea, weeks of wind and waves, the horizon empty save for gulls and stars. Then, at last, land forests, rivers, shores untouched, a world beyond the known. For those who left Scandinavia, life abroad was often harsh, but full of promise. New lands meant new farms, new homes, new beginnings. Towns grew where once there was wilderness. Trade flourished where once there was only sea. Now picture a Viking settlement abroad at twilight. Smoke rises from wooden houses. Children run along narrow paths. Merchants display goods in a small market, furs, beads, carved bone, and iron. Beyond, the longships rest quietly, their sails furled, their dragon heads gazing out to sea. The horizon glows with the last light of day, and the voices of men, women, and children mingle in the evening air. For the Vikings, raids and journeys abroad were not separate from daily life. They were an extension of it, born from hunger, from ambition, from the restless pull of the sea. And though their ships are long gone, their traces remain in the towns they built, the words they left, the stories still told by firesides across the north. Behind every Viking voyage, every feast, and every battle, there were stories, myths that gave meaning to their world. The Vikings believed that the cosmos itself was vast and layered. A great tree called Yggdrasil at its center, its branches stretching into the heavens, its roots twisting deep into unknown realms. This was the framework of their universe, the 9 worlds. Imagine that tree in your mind. Its trunk rises endlessly, bark rough and ancient, leaves whispering in a wind that comes from nowhere and everywhere. At its roots, serpents coil, gnawing at the wood. High above, an eagle perches, its wings stirring the sky. Between root and branch runs a squirrel, carrying insults from one creature to another, a messenger of mischief. This was not a still, silent tree, but a living universe, pulsing with motion, with gods, giants, spirits, and men. At the highest realm lay Asgard, the home of the gods. Here ruled Odin, the Allfather. Imagine him seated upon a great throne, one eye hidden beneath a shadow, for he sacrificed the other in exchange for wisdom. His ravens, Hugin and Munenthought and Memory fly across the world each day, returning to whisper what they have seen into his ear. Odin was not only a god of war, but of poetry, magic, and knowledge. He sought wisdom even in sacrifice, hanging himself upon Yggdrasil for 9 nights, pierced by his own spear, to discover the runes and their secrets. Beside him stood Thor, his son, the Thunderer. Broad-shouldered, with fiery hair and beard, Thor carried Mjolnir, a hammer so powerful it could crush mountains, yet return to his hand like a bird to its nest. Thor was the protector of both gods and men, battling giants who threatened the order of the world. Picture him riding in his chariot drawn by goats, the sound of thunder echoing in the clouds as his hammer strikes. Yet, though fierce, he was also beloved, a god of strength, courage, and simple loyalty. And then Loki. Neither holy god nor holy giant, Loki was the trickster. He could shift shapes, weaving lies and laughter with equal ease. Sometimes he aided the gods with cunning solutions. Other times he betrayed them, leading them toward ruin. From his schemes were born both gifts, like the treasures of the gods, and disasters, like the monstrous wolf Fenrir and the serpent Jarmungandr, destined to bring chaos at the world's end. Loki was the embodiment of change, of the unpredictable thread that ran through all life. Beyond Asgard lay other realms, Midgard, the world of humans, a realm of earth and sea, encircled by the serpent Jarmungandr. Jotunheim, the land of giants, wild and untamed, where mountains walked and rivers roared with ancient power. Niflheim, a world of ice and mist, cold and dark. Muspelheim, a realm of fire, where flames leaped endlessly, awaiting their time to consume all. And Hel, the shadowy place of the dead, ruled by Hel, Loki's daughter, half beautiful woman, half lifeless corpse. The myths told not only of the gods' power, but of their fate. For the Vikings believed even the gods would one day fall. At Ragnarok, the end of all things, Odin would face the wolf Fenrir, Thor the serpent, Jarmungandr, and the world itself would burn, sink, and be reborn anew. It was a vision not of eternal peace, but of cycles, endings, and beginnings, destruction and renewal. These stories were told in longhouses on winter nights, when the wind howled outside and snow lay heavy on the roofs. Picture the scene. A skald, the poet, rises by the fire. His voice is steady. His hands carve shapes in the air as he recites. Around him, men, women, and children listen, their faces glowing in the firelight, their minds wandering through the 9 worlds. For them, these were not only stories, they were truths woven into the fabric of life, explaining thunder in the sky, the rising of the sun, the inevitability of death, and the promise of renewal. Now picture the night after such a tale. The fire burns low, the hall grows quiet, and the listeners drift into sleep. Above them, the stars wheel in the sky like sparks from Yggdrasil's branches. The gods, the giants, the tricksterol fade into dreams, yet remain alive in the whispers of memory. Norse mythology was not only religion, nor only story. It was a mirror of the Viking soul-fierce, restless, wise, and doomed, yet always striving forward into the unknown. Behind the Longships and the sagas, behind the battles and the voyages, the real strength of Viking society lay in the home. For while men often sailed across seas, it was the women who kept the villages alive, the families bound together, and the farms thriving. Imagine a modest Viking farmhouse. Its walls are timber and sod, its roof covered in turf, blending into the hillside as though it grew from the earth itself. Inside, the single room is warm with the glow of a central hearth. The smell of bread baking fills the air, mingled with the faint tang of smoke. A loom stands near the wall, threads stretched taut, half-woven cloth waiting to be finished. Here, the woman of the house holds authority. In Viking culture, women had more independence than in many other societies of the age. While men voyaged or raided, women managed the farm-tending animals, overseeing planting and harvest, preserving food for the long winter. They also handled trade in local markets, bartering furs, wool, and cheese for tools or iron. Keys hung from a woman's belt were not only practical, but symbols of her power over the household's stores and goods. Marriage was both a partnership and a bond between families. Weddings were marked with feasts, the clinking of drinking horns, the sharing of oaths. Husbands and wives each had duties, the man to provide and protect, the woman to manage and sustain. Yet divorce was possible, and women could claim dowries or property in separation, unusual right. In a world where most were bound to the will of men, motherhood carried both joy and risk. Children were treasured, their births celebrated with offerings to the gods, but survival was uncertain. Winters were harsh, illnesses common, and many families knew both laughter and loss. Still, children were raised with stories, songs, and skills. Boys learned to fish, hunt, and fight. Girls learned to weave, cook, and tend animals, but both shared in the daily rhythm of farm life, their small hands helping wherever they could. Women could also hold respected roles beyond the farm. Some became priestesses or seeresses, known as Vavlor, wandering women who carried staffs and spoke of the future, their words feared and revered alike. In sagas, women are not only wives and mothers, but also counselors, poets, even warriors. Tales tell of shield maidens who fought beside men, though whether they were common or rare remains uncertain. Family life itself was tightly woven, kinship-bound communities together. Grandparents lived under the same roof as children. Stories passed from elder to young by the fire. Festivals brought neighbors together. Celebrations of harvest, of the solstice, of victories returned from abroad. Music, laughter, and dance filled the longhouses, pushing back the dark of endless winters. Now picture a Viking home at dusk. The animals are fed, the tools set aside. A woman hums softly as she spins wool, her children leaning against her side. The fire crackles, shadows flicker on the walls, and the scent of stew fills the room. Outside, the wind howls, but inside there is warmth, security, and belonging. This was Viking family life, not always easy, not free from sorrow, but filled with bonds of care and responsibility. In the quiet strength of women, in the laughter of children, in the stories told by elders, the Vikings found continuity. Their ships carried them far, but their homes carried them always back again. For the Vikings, life was not only raids and voyages, it was also law, order, and the quiet need for fairness in a world often harsh and unpredictable. Though they lived in scattered villages, they gathered together to govern themselves in assemblies called the Thing. Imagine a grassy field at the edge of a fjord. The summer sun hangs high, the air filled with the smell of salt and pine. Men arrive from farms and villages, some carrying shields, others leading horses. Women walk beside them, children playing nearby. They gather in a circle, their voices quieting as the assembly begins. At the center stands the law speaker. He does not hold parchment or scrolls, for in this time the law is not written, but remembered. His voice rises strong and steady as he recites the rules of the land, centuries of tradition carried in memory, passed from one law speaker to the next. He speaks of property and inheritance, of debts and disputes, of oaths sworn and broken. Each word is binding, for the law is as sacred as any prayer to the gods. Disputes are brought forward. A farmer claims his neighbor has taken land that is not his. A trader accuses another of cheating in a bargain. A family demands compensation for injury or loss. Each side speaks, witnesses are called, and the assembly listens. Justice is not about prisons or punishment. It is about balance. Fines are paid in silver, goods, or livestock. Compensation restores harmony, preventing blood feuds that could tear communities apart. And yet, feuds do happen. In such cases, the Thing becomes a place, not only of judgment, but of reconciliation. Families may agree to settle with Wurgold man price, the payment for a life lost. To refuse is to risk endless cycles of revenge. Thus, the Thing served as both shield and sword, holding violence at bay with the strength of shared law. The Thing was also political. Here, alliances were made, leaders chosen, voyages planned. The voice of the community shaped its future. Even kings were not above the Thing, for though they held power, their rule depended on the consent of free men gathered in assembly. In this way, the Vikings practiced a form of governance, both strict and communal, balance of authority and freedom. Now picture the scene as it draws to a close. The disputes are settled, the judgments spoken, the oaths sworn. Men and women mingle, trade goods, share news. A skald recites verses, his voice carrying stories of gods and heroes across the field. Children chase one another between tents, laughter rising into the summer air. Beyond them, the fjord glitters in the sunlight, longships resting at anchor. As evening falls, the assembly disperses. Farmers returned to their fields, traders to their journeys, leaders to their halls. The memory of the thing lingers, not in stone or parchment, but in the spoken word, in the trust that laws would be honored and justice upheld. For the Vikings, it gave order to a world where the sea was restless, winters were long, and survival demanded both strength and unity. In the thing, they found not only justice, but identitia, people bound together by words as much as by blood. The Vikings are often remembered for their raids, yet just as important, perhaps even more lasting, were their skills as traders and craftsmen. Their longships carried not only warriors, but goods, gifts, and ideas that flowed along rivers and seas, weaving the Viking world into a vast network of exchange. Imagine a bustling Viking market. Wooden stalls line a dirt square, the smell of roasted fish and pine smoke mixing in the air. Merchants spread furs of fox, bear, and beaver across rough-hewn tables. Women display finely woven cloth, dyed in deep reds and blues. Traders from distant lands mingle with locals, their accents strange, their goods stranger still. Silver coins clink in pouches, though barter fur for iron, wool for grain is just as common. From the forests of the north came timber, tar, and furs. From their farms, Vikings offered butter, cheese, and honey. In return, they sought the treasures of distant lands, spices from the east, silks from Byzantium, glassware from the Franks, and silver from the Arab world. Their reach extended far beyond Scandinavia, linking them to markets as distant as Baghdad and Constantinople. Down the rivers of Russia, Viking merchants called the Rus sailed with their goods. Imagine their ships gliding along wide rivers, passing through endless forests. They carry amber, bright as frozen sunlight, and walrus ivory carved into trinkets. At each stop, they trade for silver dirhams, the coins of the caliphate, which find their way back into Viking hordes. Some of these coins have been found buried deep in Scandinavian soil. Hidden treasures that speak of journeys thousands of miles long. Craftsmanship, too, was at the heart of Viking life. Blacksmiths shaped iron into axes, spears, and plowshares, their forges glowing with heat. Carpenters built ships with such precision that their designs would not be surpassed for centuries. Jewelers worked in silver and gold, twisting delicate filigree, setting bright stones into brooches and rings. Woodcarvers etched dragons and serpents into beams and furniture, filling even humble homes with beauty. Women, skilled in weaving and textile work, created cloth both practical and prized. On looms, they wove wool into garments, dyed with natural colors, rids from madder root, blues from woad, yellows from birch. Some fabrics were so fine they were traded abroad, becoming luxuries in foreign courts. Trade was not only about goods, but about connection. Through it, the Vikings learned new techniques, adopted new styles, and carried home stories of distant places. A comb found in England might have been carved in Norway. A Byzantine coin could end up in a Swedish burial mound. A silk ribbon from China might be worn at a feast on the edge of a frozen fjord. Now picture the end of a trading day. The market quiets, the stalls are packed away. Merchants gather around a fire, drinking ale from horns, their voices soft with laughter. Goods are tucked into chests, guarded carefully through the night. In the silence, the only sounds are the crackle of fire, the lapping of water against the shore, and the faint whisper of wind in the pines. For the Vikings, Trade was as vital as war. It brought wealth, it brought beauty, it brought knowledge. It tied their small villages to the great cities of the world, turning distant lands into neighbors. And in the crafts they left behind, jewelry, ships, carvings, we still see their hands at work, steady, skillful, and enduring. Every story has an ending, even the saga of the Vikings. The Viking Age, which began with sudden raids on distant shores in the late 8th century, gradually faded by the 11th century. The Longships still sailed, the axes still gleamed, but the world around them had changed. Christianity spread across Scandinavia, carried by missionaries and kings who saw in the new faith both spiritual promise and political power. Wooden temples to Odin and Thor gave way to stone churches, their bells ringing across fjords and valleys. The old gods, once whispered of by firelight, slowly retreated into memory, though their stories lingered in sagas and songs. The rise of strong kingdoms also reshaped Viking life. Denmark, Norway, and Sweden grew into nations, with kings who claimed power over many once independent chieftains. Laws became more uniform, lands more organized, and the wild freedom of the Viking Age gave way to the order of monarchies. Beyond Scandinavia, the lands they had touched began to absorb them. In England, Vikings founded towns that became part of the kingdom itself. In Normandy, Norse settlers blended so fully with the locals that their descendants, the Normans, would one day conquer England in turn. In Russia, the Rus shaped the beginnings of states that would endure long after their ships were gone. And yet, the Vikings never truly disappeared. Their influence lived on in the places they settled, in the words that slipped into new languages, in the trade routes that linked east and west. Their ships inspired later designs. Their sagas carried the rhythm of northern life into the written word. Even today, their myths echo in stories, their symbols etched on stones, their memory a mixture of fear, admiration, and fascination. Picture the last voyages. Longships sail quietly from the fjords, not to raid, but to trade or settle. Their sails catch the wind, their dragon prows still fierce, but the world no longer trembles at their sight. On the shores of Scandinavia, families wave farewell, knowing that though adventure calls, the old age of raiders has passed. Now the fjords grow quiet. Smoke rises gently from farmhouses, sheep graze on green hills, and fishermen cast nets into still waters. The sound of axes on shields fades, replaced by the softer rhythms of daily life. The Viking Age has ended, but its legacy endures, flowing like the tide into the centuries that follow. And so, we close our journey through the world of the Vikings. We have walked their fields, rowed their ships, sat in their assemblies, and listened to their gods. We have seen them raid, trade, settle, and change. Their lives were hard, their world harsh, yet they carved meaning from it with courage, craft, and story. As you rest now, let the images drift gently through your mind. A longship rocking softly on calm water, a hall glowing with firelight, a family huddled close against the winter cold. Above it all, the northern sky, vast and filled with stars, the aurora shimmering faintly at the edge of night. The Vikings are gone, their voices silent, their sails furled. But their spirit lingers in the stories told, in the places they touched, in the quiet wonder we still feel when we speak their name. Now, let that wonder fade into stillness. Let the weight of history slip from your thoughts. Breathe deeply and drift like a ship carried by calm seas into the quiet harbor of sleep.